It's a great pleasure to welcome to What's Next, a man who's no stranger, a man who's I've interviewed across many roles. A man who I respect highly is Vukani Mngxati, who is the CEO of Microsoft South Africa. And I've got to see you twice this week, Vukani. It's lovely to see you again. Good day to you.
My friend Aki, it's so good to see you again. I saw you. When was it? I think it was
Tuesday evening.
on Tuesday night. So wonderful to see you again.
Yes, now listen, it's great. As I said in the introduction, I've known you for many years. You've had different roles in different organizations, and you've led with incredible leadership. I've always looked up to your leadership, and people that know you and work under you will say exactly the same thing. Now, when you look back at your childhood, I'd love to know that specific moment that you realized there is something special in Vukani, and Vukani is going to take this leadership role towards the ICT sector that's really shaped you as a business leader you are today. Never mind the ICT sector, you're a business leader. When did that spark? When did that spark see you? When did you see that spark growing up?
Oh man, you take me back. Aki, I think actually, I was never gonna be in IT. I was going to be an accountant. I was going to be a CA. I went to university to study to be a chartered accountant. And then there was a course that you had to do. It was mandatory. It was called Business Information Systems back in the day. I mean, I went to university almost 30 years ago. So, the lady who taught this course, who was our lecturer, came to me and said, Vukani, you're so good at this course, just do it. You just measure in it. So I said, no, I want to be a CA. She said, I'll pay for it. I'll pay you. I'll sponsor you to do this course. Of course, I took her up on it, and I measured in business information systems, and the rest is history.
Amazing. So it took someone to recognize that fire inside you to say, Vukani, I want you to do this. And it must have resonated with you incredibly at the time. Was it like somebody had lit in this light and said, and you realized this is me? Was it that instant?
Actually, I was just good at the course, so I was doing well at it. I wouldn't say that I thought of myself as the leader of technology business at that time. I just thought, hey, here's a good cause I do well in, and apparently there's good things you can do if you have it. And by luck or by God's grace, I went there, and look at where I am now.
Oh man. And look at where you've come from in terms of all the other positions you've held in the last few decades. But becoming CEO of Microsoft South Africa is no small feat. I mean, I remember talking to Lillian Barnard, the previous CEO, and talking about the roles that you have and what a critical role it is, because it's one of those roles that you're changing business, you're changing the trajectory of the economy, and it's really a testament to a stellar career which you've had. Can you go back to that first job? I know you've covered that university part right now. Can you remember the first job? And if I may ask you something personal, your first paycheck, or do you remember those days?
I don't know how much earlier you want me to go, but my father used to work as a driver. He used to deliver newspapers in KZN, so he used to work for independent newspapers actually as a driver. So when I'm broke and I needed a bit of cash, I would be his van man, and they would take me around, and I'd get a wages. It was $25 a night. By the way, you deliver newspapers overnight so that people can read it in the morning. So, and you would drive, stop, I would pick the papers that need to be delivered at a coffee shop. I'd put them in there, and we'll do this throughout the night, and I would earn $25. So that's how I started. But my real job was at Accenture when I got the job. And Aki, I think per annum was 90,000 rands. I don't know what's that. But that's many moons ago. And by the way, it was quite incredible at the time. I mean, if you take 90,000 to 7,500 rands a month.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you've had an incredible career at Accenture. We've interacted many times. I think you were there for 25 years, which is testament to who you are as a leader. And you took Accenture to new heights when you left to join Microsoft. And it's such an incredible career because you've clearly learned many important business lessons during your time there. Can you share any of those key lessons that you've learned and those things that have helped you grow? Because it's through these things and these learnings and the challenges throughout your career that have helped you grow over the years.
No, by the way, thank you for that recognition, Aki. I appreciate it. You know, but when I took on the role of the leader of Accenture, when I think it was 20, just before COVID, and by far the biggest challenge I had to deal with was running that operation during COVID. By far was probably the biggest. And you know, the challenge as a consulting company was that you had to ensure that you are delivering the services to the customers remotely. Of course, naturally, we know how to do this, but not being able to interact with the customers on a day-to-day basis was just a very difficult period. But I mean, we were able to navigate this, and frankly, during COVID, we probably grew the fastest at that time. So the lesson I took out of there is that there is a silver lining in every difficult period. There is always one, and the question is, how do you see it? You know, me and you had the book launch on Tuesday, and one of the conversation was, we are wired to see the negatives. Our minds are wired to, if there are 10 stimuli, you will see all 5 that are negative, but you will only see 1 or 2 of the positives. And I think the key lesson there is just to rewire our thinking so that you can actually figure out what the silver lining that exists in every adversity.
Wow. And I remember talking to you during COVID, and that's certainly something that came out, that you left an impression on me on how you dealt with adversity, how organizations dealt with adversity, and how Accenture was there to help those organizations through those tough times. And I'm sure throughout your career, you've seen some other challenges as well. I mean, COVID is one of them, and COVID feels so far away. But you and I, having shared the same kind of thread of technology, we've seen how Moore's law has just transformed the acceleration of technology. We've seen how cloud infrastructure has changed the way businesses do business. And I think today we are witnessing this most radical change from my perspective, which is AI, which is really changing the trajectory of South African business and global business. So when you look back at the last 25 years and you've seen how businesses have evolved, what do you think is the most radical change you've witnessed in how South Africans view and South African businesses view technology specifically? Has it changed? Are we changing, or are we in a stage where this massive change is coming to us really, really fast? How do you see it?
Look, Aki, the change in technology is a constant factor. I mean, you would remember the Y2K days. You would remember the introduction of cloud, which was a significant transformation. But I would say by far the most profound change that we are seeing is now. And that's, by the way, the reason why I joined Microsoft. And it's been an incredible journey over the past 10 months to be in this amazing company, because as you indicated earlier, this Microsoft just is in the eye of the storm. And that's what attracted me into the company, because I always want to figure out what is the next wave of technology that fundamentally shifts humanity. And I think artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence is DAX tech. You know, earlier on today, I had a conversation with some of our partners, and we were just talking about the fact that if you think about what's happening in the world right now, the change on how the services are provided is fundamentally moving in a very different direction. How we used to receive services, whether it's a public service or it's a private sector provided service, that service is fundamentally changing right now before us. The way that I used to do work as an employee of a business is fundamentally shifting. You know, in the past, you had to spend hours on end figuring out a topic. Now, today, with our AI, you have the opportunity to ask the question and tell it to execute stuff for you. So that paradigm is shifting so much. And by the way, the rate of innovation is just fast tracking so much because, you know, if you think about how technological solutions were developed in the past, you have to write pieces of code yourself. 80% of the pieces of code today will be generated to you by some agent. And you probably have to fill in 20% of the gap. And therefore, what used to take 3 years to build now takes 3 months. And therefore, we are in the eye of the storm in terms of that change, and it's going to be so significant in our lifetime that we will never, I don't think we'll see a change similar to what we are on right now.
Absolutely fascinating. And of course, as humans, we need to continually evolve and adapt to these changes. And I mean, you're talking
That's right.
about this change now, which is profound. You talk about COVID, which was a challenge within the business community, and you know the whole world faced the same challenge. You dealt with it. But when you look back, what would you say in your career has been the toughest challenge that you've navigated in your career? And what did it teach you? Because sometimes we learn all these lessons early on or in the middle of our career. Can you recall that toughest challenge that changed the way you are as a leader today?
Look, in leadership, I mean, I got onto these leadership roles fairly young, okay? And you have got to figure out how to grow a business and drive a business that is providing significant change to customers out there. And I think one of the biggest personal change I've had to navigate is to understand that people are at the core of anything, of everything. Every single change or every single transformation that you will see, it's centered or is grounded on how people are receiving that change and how people are ready for that change. Even now, in this new age of it, I often go out there and say, we as South Africans have a responsibility to educate our people and teach our people in the transformation that's happening now. Because if we do that right, then we can transform faster. We can actually get those people not be so disrupted by the change. And that's the biggest lesson I learned in my leadership journey, Aki, that actually it's all about human race. It's all about people. It's about how you enhance humanity. And if you get this, you realize that therefore the purpose of doing what we're doing is hardly about making money. Money is important, but what's more important is purpose. And that purpose is about ensuring that our people are never left behind. They stay on top of it and are able to respond to the challenges of the day.
Well, this is a great response because it leads into my next question, because you're now leading Microsoft South Africa, which is a massive responsibility. We know Microsoft as a global company, how you've driven innovation over the last decades. South Africa, Microsoft is synonymous with incredible evolution of innovation. When you talk about AI, you mentioned earlier that we are at the eye of a storm. What is your primary vision for the company's role in driving AI? You mentioned about it being an inclusive technology. As a continent, as a country, we've got to bring everybody on board on this AI revolution and the cloud transformation that's happening across the country. What is your vision for this particular role? Because you in your hands and the role that you have as leading Microsoft South Africa, that is a massive responsibility when you look at the surrounding changes that are happening in technology.
Yeah, I mean, Aki, again, the there is a significant improvement in technology. So I see the responsibility of Microsoft to bring that change to South Africa in a structured, in the right way that brings about value to South Africans. I also see a huge responsibility in ensuring that, our people in South Africa are not left behind. They are not scared of this technology, because, to be quite frank, there is still a significant amount of skepticism. Are we going to lose our jobs? Will AI do the work instead of us? Will it exacerbate unemployment in South Africa? What about security risks? Are we exposed? And I think we have a responsibility to drive responsible AI, but we even have a bigger responsibility to our people, that they understand, they learn, and they can use the knowledge that they have to work alongside machines. We're living in an era where every single human is going to have an agentic capability which they utilize to execute something. And unless we create an environment where our people get this, they understand it, they are part of it, we run the risk of leaving our people behind, and frankly, we cannot afford it. And then the last part is that I think there's a huge responsibility for us as Africans to ensure that our Africanness does not get lost in this transformation. This is why it's important. For example, things such as language. AI must speak Zulu. AI must be able to speak isiXhosa. It must be able to understand context. Now, it's not about only the language. It's also about being contextual to the South African situation. So we have a huge responsibility, not only to bring the technology and not only to bring people along, but to safeguard that which is core to us, that makes us Africans. And I believe truly that it's our job as leaders in this space to make sure that this is not lost and is protected at all costs. Then finally, I'll tell you, Aki, that we have a responsibility of securing our data and ensuring that our sovereign state does not lose its sovereignty, that you don't have risks of our data being utilized incorrectly or landing in wrong hands. This is really what we should be worried about and fascinated about as a country.
Fantastic. I absolutely love it. And we've got to keep our culture intact. We've got such a rich culture in our country. The language and context is so important when it comes to the world that we're living in. That's, AI is surrounding us and context is so important. If you could go back, Vukani, to the first day as an analyst, I think it must have been around 2000. At the turn of this, let's go back to the turn of this last century. And of course, you mentioned Y2K, and it was at the time where all of that was happening. What is that advice that you would give yourself at the time, knowing everything that you know now and what you've learned through your leadership style? Would you give yourself any advice back then that you could use today? What would it be?
That's interesting. I'd probably give myself 3 pieces of advice. I would say, it's important to not sacrifice life for success. At the end of the day, Aki, when we depart this world, nobody is going to ask you when you reach the other side, how much money did you make? But I think there will be a significant question around whether you truly valued your family, whether you gave yourself an opportunity to live a life that's purposeful, that's worth something. So I would probably tell myself that I should be fascinated more about purpose. I should be fascinated more about what my role is in this context of life as a South African and as a contributor in society. So that be a big thing. That's what actually is top of mind. I think a lot about this. I have already told you about people. I'm a people believer. Investing in people is absolutely the right thing to do. Every single person deserves to be successful and to have the opportunity to be good humans and good citizens. And we have an opportunity to play a role there as leaders. And then I would probably tell myself that after 30 years of work, of being in the industry, this is a long game. You know, it's not about quick gratification and I need to get to it tomorrow type of, but you know, you pace yourself. The first 20 years of my life was learning, you know, of my career as really learning and figuring out how to be myself, okay, and how to contribute as Vukani. You know, when I talk to you, I'm not talking to you as, you know, I'm not mimicking somebody else. This is me having learned what I've learned and applying what I apply in my current role. So I would say it really is about pacing yourself and understanding this is a long game and it's not about quick enrichment.
Great advice. Vukani, when you take off your CEO of Microsoft hat and you're away from the role, who is Vukani Mngxati on the weekends? How do you unwind? Because you mentioned, I mean, today, I'd hate to look at your diary because you're interacting with business leaders all the time. You're in CEO mode most of the time. You're in strategic road. You talk with government leaders. You've got a very important role. But at some point, you've got to switch that mind to relax. Do you relax? Can you switch off? How do you unwind? And what are those passions that balance the boardroom and balance the Vukani outside the boardroom? Is there such a thing, or is Vukani someone who's always switched on?
I don't think you can really switch off, Aki, okay? You know, people always say to me, how do you create work-life balance? I don't think there's anything such as work-life balance, but there's moments which you kind of take, which I'm a husband at first, you know, to my lovely wife. I'm a father to 3 daughters. So this I value. So I like to, whenever I can, ring fence time so I can be home. I can be there for my kids. I can be there for my wife. And of course, I spend a lot of time looking after my health. You know, so I engage in physical activity. I enjoy running. In fact, right now I'm training for High Rocks, which I think is going to be crazy. In fact, I've gotten Microsoft into a challenge, so we'll take 30 people, I think, to High Rocks this November. So I try and really look after myself. But really, I also love to read. Which is why you saw me there on Tuesday. So my problem, the time that I take off, I take off over the weekends. I spend just with a good book. You know, there's so much wealth of knowledge that one can get from there, and I try to do as much of that as possible.
Fantastic. Speaking about books, you're probably reading Adrian Gore's latest book, is where I saw you the other night at the book launch. So I'm not going to ask you to judge it now because you're in the middle of it, as I am, and I'm absolutely loving the conversation of the book. But you've probably read many books over the years because you're very passionate about reading. Is there one book that's influenced you the most incredibly that you keep going back to and saying, that lesson, that book? Is there one book that stands out?
You know, from a leadership standpoint, I love The Art of War. I don't know if you had the opportunity to read it. The principles of leadership that's encapsulated in that book has just kind of been the way that I like to show up. So I use a lot of it as a mechanism to remind myself at the end of the day how to be a leader and a good leader that people can look up to. And I often ask myself, if I was led by Vukani, would I be able to follow him and be happy? So that's kind of what is in my head quite a lot.
Vukani Mngxati, the CEO of Microsoft South Africa, thank you for your time, and it's really great to see you again, brother. And it's wonderful to catch up with you again. And let's do this more often. It's just great to see your vision and where you are in terms of leadership and what you see for the country, because you're not just leading a company like Microsoft, but you're leading part of the future of so many young people and so many businesses in the country. So thank you for your time, Vukani.
Aki, always a pleasure, my friend, and appreciate you.